Hello everybody, this is Havoc with some more Total War Saga Troy content for the masses. For those that don't know, the content partners for Total War were given a battle-only build of the game with a fight between Achilles and Hector, showing off a very solid lineup of troops along with a couple of Mythos units. We were given 24 hours access to record anything and everything we wanted to with a few exceptions, and then squeeze all of that into 2 videos. Now, my first video was a cinematic battle called the First Battle of Troy, and if you haven't watched it yet, well, you should. To put a lot of work into it, especially within the time constraints we had, so go do that first. Then come back to this video, where I'm going to break down a lot of things I did and did not like from my time playing. And just as a heads up, we were told that everything we saw, from design to balance to mechanics, are about as close to the release version as we are going to get. Keep this in mind throughout the entire video. Let's dive in. Anyone who's been on the channel knows that the UI design and functionality of any game I play has a very large impact on my opinion of the game. I'm pretty adept at figuring it out quickly, but as I like to try to speak for players of all skill levels, if I can't find it or figure things out, that usually means you have some problems. There's a lot of UI things here going on, both good and bad, so this first part might be a bit long. Well, actually, all the parts are pretty long. So looking at one of the very first frames in my battle as Achilles, the first thing you are going to notice is a near parallel to Warhammer in terms of UI, which is probably the best thing that Troy has going for it from what we've seen so far. Warhammer has some of the most easily accessible information during battles of all Total War titles, and Troy is now a very clear second. Your unit cards have a host of stats available to it, including a breakdown of how it compares to another one, very easily seen. You have a kill count, a unit count, total health count, base and buff stats, as well as any battle ability buffs clearly labeled on the bottom. It's a part of the UI that I will always be on board with and I absolutely love. You'll then notice that the icons above your units on the battlefield have a host of useful information as well, albeit not quite as slick as Warhammer. At any given time, you are able to see unit health, morale, finally in a historical-ish title, stamina, which I don't believe we've ever actually seen yet, ammo, and status effects. This is just me being a picky designer, but I do wish they'd squish down the unit health and morale bars a bit. Having 2 super thick UI bars just takes up screen space, and as I mentioned, I think Warhammer does it very well. But in terms of the various bars, we do have more information than ever to see our units, so I really can't complain on that front. However, there are some decently serious design choices I'm not okay with. First, and absolutely foremost, is that Troy is using Attila and 3K's bland green-blue-red banner approach to their units, and that is boring as hell. As part of Warhammer's battle appeal is that you can very clearly see the different races, and the teams are pretty seamlessly designed based on the unit banners. Why can't we have Achilles' faction flag icon on his troops? We know it's possible because CAA has done it before with Warhammer, and this is based on the Warhammer engine. Slapping faction flags instead of the bland 3-color shields would be way more interesting and allow you to keep track of your own units much easier during a battle. Next up are the shield icons above the UI bars. There are 2 denotations that these shields represent. Well, I believe they represent. It was neither confirmed nor denied. Some of us kind of figured it out. First, full circle shields usually mean they are an unshielded unit. Not sure how that works out, but okay. And shields with the notches on the sides mean the unit does have shields. So as you can see, for a majority of Achilles' army, they are indeed shielded. Second, the decoration of the bar gives you the weight class of the unit. In theory, weight class is divided up into light, medium, and heavy. Light troops have the gray basic bar, medium troops have the multiple bands garnished a bit, and heavy units have the multiple bands garnished a bit. Wait, did I say that right? Yes, I did. There is currently no distinction between medium and heavy units. This is a pretty big problem for a game that is almost entirely focused on a class system for competent battle tactics. Not to mention that it's not super easy to tell in a split second what the unit class is. Those details are just not easy to immediately determine. Also, cue super bland icons with the shield again because it honestly still triggers me. So there's going to be a pretty steady confusion for a split-second decisions across the board here, as you accidentally choose a light unit instead of a heavy because they're pretty close in design. Or God forbid you need a heavy unit as a beginner and can't find one using the shield icons. It's a bit of a mess. The last stickler is the stone UI elements. This is the era of bronze, marble, and very stark Greek pottery. Stone is not a prominent material in this area like the aforementioned ones. The stone feels very Warhammer-esque, which I know earlier I said was its strongest point, but in regards to UI material outside of the units, it feels really out of place. So in comes my personal quick redesign, something that will hopefully create some pop and cater to the theme more efficiently while solving the UI battle problems we're currently facing. For starters, remove that stone texture and replace it with the black and orange pottery. It may clash slightly with the 3D portraits, but it'd still fit better with a thematic era. Next are the weight class denotations. Spoken to a few YouTubers who had no clue there was even an indicator, if that is still the indicator, so in this redesign, it's a simple texture overlay to make those classes really stand out. These two design choices alone would go a long way to make Troy stand for itself instead of looking more copycat. I'm going to be straight up before I begin this section and give my very honest opinions of battles. I do not like them at all, to the point where I actually got very ticked off playing them, and that's not a good way to start a press event for any game, much less Total War. And here's the why behind the frustration. Battle difficulty. The build we received had two difficulties attached to it, easy and hard. Naturally, most of us veterans tried hard first, and most of us got absolutely and ashamedly wrecked, especially playing as Achilles. On hard, Achilles had the battle prowess of a puppy. If you took on Hector, you died before Hector lost 30% of his health. If you avoided Hector, Achilles during my battle ran away barely 2 minutes into full melee with troops. And if you didn't use Achilles at all, except for his Warhammer-esque magical buffs, then you got the broken broomstick up the bum by Hector and his invincible walls of heavily defended troops. Which did zero defending, by the way. I played Achilles on hard at least 10 times, and never did I ever come remotely close to beating Hector. 2 or 3 other content partners resorted to some severe cheese tactics, and even then, they barely won. Hector on hard was actually the closest I came to feeling like a true Total War battle, but I only think it was due to Hector's heavy defensive units. Otherwise, I would have gotten decimated by Achilles' troops and their steroid-induced rage aggression. I actually managed to win Hector on hard with barely 100 troops left, mind you. Not the most glorious of victories by any shot. However, flip the switch to easy and it's an entirely, completely different story. At one point, I literally just did not move any of my troops just for an experiment and still won. If I went hardcore offensive, it was a rout fest. My units were untouchable, invincible, and apparently scared the holy living crap out of the enemy. I felt bad for the units I was fighting against on easy. They were screwed from the get-go. Battle length. When it comes down to battle speed for Troy, most of us expected a very slow-paced game. After all, this era focuses on melee combat, and even in Warhammer, melee-only combat can be a bit slow. Combined with the fact we had 70 minutes to make 2 videos, several of us creators were like, oh dang, that must mean battles are slow, right? There's a ton of time to cover the 2 videos. Oh, how we were wrong. On hard difficulty, my longest battle was somewhere around 13 minutes, which is pretty par for a solid Warhammer battle and sounds okay at first, until I say that maybe 6 of those minutes were using what we would call tactics, and the remainder was about 4 units battling it out while the rest of the armies routed. Why the long melee battle? 2 units, the Myrmidons, are unbreakable and tough as nails to boot, so they just simply stay in battle until the last one dies. The other 2 were the tankiest, most defensive units Hector employs, and they are immune to flanking, so no matter where you hit them, they just barely, if ever, lose heart. And that's how a majority of my hard battles went. The fun lasted upwards of 4 to 5 minutes, then the melee slog between the same units went on until one side won. Now flip that to easy and it gets even better. I won a battle as Hector on easy in under 2 minutes. Let that sink in. I was able to wreck units so quickly that the entire Achaean army routed and the battle was over in less than 2 minutes. Now remember what I said in the beginning. In the dev interview, I specifically asked about this, and all they said was everything is working as it's intended to work. But I just don't see how that's possible. How is it okay to have a near full stack versus full stack battle last less than 2 minutes? How is it okay that the exact same 4 units will always be the last to slog it out for 6 minutes straight? That's a rhetorical question, by the way. It's not okay. As both a historical and a Warhammer fan, I do appreciate both styles of battle length. Warhammer battles are just not meant to last long, and magic is the primary factor that speeds that up. Historical battles are supposed to be longer by nature, mimicking real-life battles. And with Troy being the myth explained, to me that means it's focused more on historical style battles. It means the battles last 15 minutes or longer, with constant tactics being employed and the decisive factor being an unexpected move or even just superior troops. Not a few minutes of movement and the rest just sitting there until they hack each other to death. Battle balance. As I explained in the UI section of this video, units are broken up into light, medium, and heavy weight class. Light units are designed to be quicker and lose stamina more slowly, but can't stand up in a straight battle for very long. Heavy units are much slower and they lose their fatigue very quickly, but are super tanky, designed to hold their ground. And medium troops are obviously a blend. Now during my battles, I noticed that some light units look to be running in double time speed mode, even when I was playing in normal speed. It looks very odd and honestly on the side of just goofy and out of place. But again, during the dev interview when I asked specifically about this, I got that same response. Everything is working as intended, to the point where they said that there is a light unit that is 3 times faster than the slowest unit, and that unit could run the entire game and only ever get winded. I was very surprised at that, considering that, again, this isn't Warhammer. In what way does it make sense in an infantry-only battle? Oh, and by the way, that light unit could easily run down the centaurs because of reasons. Just seems odd. Another thing I noticed were abilities that were nearly impossible to counter, with some units having more than one uncounterable ability, and it severely limits tactics. For instance, immunity to flanking. This means that a unit can get hit in the backside without losing any morale penalties whatsoever. You could charge into the backside of this unit with any one of your own, and it's more of a nuisance to the defending unit than a real problem. Unbreakable is another ability. For the last time, this is not Warhammer. Having a unit be unbreakable for an entire match is a bit OP in the regular human world, and I don't know that we've actually ever seen a historical Total War game unit have that. Not off the top of my head anyways. There are of course several others, but from what I saw overall, these non or nearly non-counterable abilities severely weaken the chance for players to use tactics in a battle. Imagine an AI spam army, which you know is going to happen, of units that are immune to flanking. So how in the heck are you going to drop their morale far enough to rout them aside from spamming ranged units in their back? Or take an army of light units versus heavy. Heavy units will lose stamina a lot quicker than their light counterparts, meaning that light units can dance around them all day with no issues. Several other units are very underwhelming on top of that. Both the chariots and the centaurs did very little contribute to the battle, and running into the backside of archers caused next to no morale drop, and the fight of heavy cav versus light archers lasted way longer than it ever should have. There just seems to be this massive hole in balancing across several aspects of the battles we played, and I know a good majority of the players agreed that this was a big problem. To wrap up my impressions, everything that I saw in our battle event left me very confused and honestly just disappointed. I haven't touched on several other pieces that concern me, simply because I'm worn out from just what I've said already. It's been my concern from the start that CA was trying to find a middle ground that both historical and Warhammer players could coexist inside a single game. But it's very clear that what we've seen thus far, that place simply does not exist and probably shouldn't exist. The Mythos units are cool, and honestly it is a cool take, but it isn't fitting inside the mechanics they have now for the historical side. Having epic heroes is great, but having Warhammer style magic where Hector can literally heal units just goes a bit far historically, but there's nothing else to satisfy the full fantasy experience. And combat obviously follows that same route. They want to focus on infantry warfare, but do not give the balance or the ability to make a legit melee engagement fun. You could make infantry warfare engaging by having spears push back units, or let light infantry disengage without routing. Have swordsmen with their increased melee attack cause units they're fighting to wear down quicker. There's so many things that they could do, and what I wanted from this game are battles where it was my tactics that won the day, not because a unit cannot rout or is immovable or won't die when flanked. That's not fun, nor engaging, nor to me like a good Total War battle. For those that haven't seen, I gave a relatively unobjective viewpoint on the Epic exclusive announcement. It's simply laying down the positives and negatives of pushing the game to Epic for the first year. And on this channel there are times like that where I do like to approach it from a completely unobjective stance. But now comes my personal opinion. From what we've seen, the lack of marketing, the lackluster trailers of the last couple of days, and now the reveal of battles that are extremely unlikely to be changed before release, it's pretty clear that CA knew this game was just simply not going to do well. Saga titles already have a nasty rep thanks to the poor release of Thrones, and there was just no way to make Troy so incredible without having to devote the time, resources, and money into it, which would have then made it a full-blown game. So they sold it to Epic. Again, amazingly smart business move. I don't care what you think, it is a very smart corporate business move. Why not sell a subpar game to a company that will pay for all your dev costs and pay you on top of it, and have them release it for free so people play it? But it is very, very anti-consumer. And like any good dad who sees a bad report card from their kid, I'm not mad. I'm really not. I'm just disappointed that it seems they never ever gave Troy a fighting chance. And it very well could lead to the end of the Saga series. I know you've seen other channels' battles and other people's impressions, so let me know your thoughts on the situation at hand. Hopefully we will be getting access to the campaign map, and I'll be able to show it off before release, as this is my last fighting hope for the game as a whole. This is Havoc, and I'll see you later.